What's up, guys? It's your boy James, aka 68J, coming to you on this Thursday, and I'm super excited as I have a extraordinary person on my show, someone I'm a huge fan of, and I've been following her and her work for quite some time. Molly Elmore. Molly, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, Jay. Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. I was telling you right before we went live that I've been following you and Jimmy, your work, just phenomenal. I got a lot of questions. We're going to be talking about several things, but before we get into that, let's start with who is Molly Elmore prior to crypto, your background, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my career, the big sort of chunk of my career was as a data analyst in the advertising research world. So I'm a trained statistician and spent a lot of years building Excel forecasting tools and analyzing sort of data around ad effectiveness, which is why when I got into this digital asset space, sort of the research and the quantitative side was pretty easy for me because I've done that.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of interesting too, because after that career, I ended up becoming a soap maker, which is kind of random, and then became a business coach. And it's lately people have questioned why I have sort of the qualifications to be participating in the XRP Unleashed film and some other endeavors. And they're like, you were like a soap maker. I'm like, that was 1 year of my very long, it was several years of my very long career. But all of my sort of skills in terms of analysis were really formed as a data analyst, working for Fortune 10 and Fortune 50 advertisers globally, measuring how well their advertising influenced people.
Wow. So the next question would be, it sounds like you had an extraordinary background, a lot of experience. So how long, what made you look at crypto and specifically, I guess, XRP? Was that the first thing, or you, like so many other people, like me, you heard about Bitcoin and then started exploring? How did you get into crypto and what led you to XRP?
So my interest in getting into the space really had nothing to do with like trying to make money.
What
happened was I was a business coach at the time. I had the soap making business, as I mentioned, and then I ended up mentoring other people who had manufacturing businesses. And I had a bunch of clients who had money issues, like they needed to charge more for their products and they were struggling. They felt like they weren't good enough to charge a premium amount. I mean, we're talking about $10 bars of soap.
Right.
So I was kind of struggling with this, and I was in a coaching program at the time for business coaches, and someone suggested to me, they're like, if you knew how the money system works and saw what like a scam it is, you would not have emotional issues with this money. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It like made no sense to me. And they're like, you know what, don't take my word for it. Go read this book called The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh, wow.
Your money issues, like sort of self-worth issues around money, and those for your clients, those will be magically erased once you understand this. And it was such a bizarre like recommendation that I like went and got the book, actually listened to it on audiobook. It's a monster. It was a 24-hour audiobook.
Okay.
And I read a lot, but no book has really been as pivotal in changing my life as this book. It's the history of the Federal Reserve System and central banking, and kind of the whole idea of fiat money kind of being printed almost out of nothing.
Wow.
And so it became very clear to me. I'm like, wow, like our money system is pretty messed up. I had no idea. Well, what is another option? And that is how I got into the, crypto and digital asset space. And like many, Bitcoin was the largest one at the time. So I looked into that. And I'm a business coach and I love coaching programs. So of course I joined a coaching program to learn about crypto.
Wow.
And they were kind of teaching us one after the other, the sort of top 10, top 20 tokens. They're also very interested in like a lot of the newer stuff. They're very into gaming and DeFi. And so I like to make infographics. And one thing I was doing at that time was I made one out of each blockchain just as a way for me to solidify my own knowledge and understanding.
Right.
And I started helping other women in the crypto space because back then, this was like 3 years ago, there was a lot of like crypto bro energy, and women were going into these programs and they were the tone was very condescending. Well, you need to do your own research. If you don't know the answer to the question, then you're not.
Right.
So women were like, this is annoying. I don't really want to be treated this way.
Right.
So I created a program where the tone and the vibe of it was just very, very different.
I see.
So I start making these infographics on all of them, and I go one down the list, and I get to XRP, and I'm talking to the coaches in my program at the time, and they're like, you got to skip that one. That's the banker's coin. We don't like that one.
Wow.
I didn't know any better. So I go on and I get to number 10. I've got Phantom on there, Luna on there, all these sort of ones that don't even really exist anymore.
Right.
And I'm like, the OCD in me was like, I can't just like skip one. Like, it won't be like thorough. So I go back and I look up XRP. And I'm a pretty good researcher. I can find information very, very quickly.
Right.
I immediately find, so after I've done all these other blockchains, I immediately find two really weird things about XRP. Number one is the buyback.
Right.
Number two is EthGate. And I was like, hold your horses here. These other blockchains that have these juicy scandals like this.
Right.
It's fascinating. And I was like, there's obviously something different going on here with XRP than I've seen with other blockchains that are all kind of telling the same story.
Right.
And so I pretty quickly found a woman named Linda P. Jones. She wrote a couple books about.
I like Linda. Yeah, I like her.
And she had a podcast that I was listening to. And one day I'm like walking in the park in the morning and she's got Jimmy on to talk about the buyback and this, his thesis and beliefs about their kind of being in agreement with the banks many, many years ago about using XRP for payments and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is amazing and fascinating. And I had all of my students in the program listen to this episode. And I rarely, I used to crank through podcasts back then, and I rarely would listen to one more than once. And I listened to this one like twice back to back. So I was like, wow. And so this is like, ages before I actually meet Jimmy. And he ends up, I put out infographics about a lot of our stuff, the stuff in the XRP world and EthGate and the buyback. He invites me to join the buyback committee, the second version that he had. And he formed a subcommittee of that to create valuation models for XRP, which ended up becoming the paper that many people have read.
Right.
And it started this sort of great working relationship and ended up kind of being a part of Val Hill. But the journey didn't start for me because I was trying to make money off of digital.
Right.
That's why I thought that XRP was going to be the one. It was very much like I was following this trail of breadcrumbs, and every time some interesting thing caught my eye, kind of went in a new direction.
Right.
And it opened this door for me to understanding how crazy the money system is, the connection between our governments, global governments, and the money system, and things that if you had told me these things 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. And it has sort of been a very eye-opening journey to learn that we are getting a new financial system. It's going to run on the blockchain. It's been in the works for years. There's definitely been a concerted effort on the part of media to distract people from what the actual plan is.
Right.
But the bankers still they love press releases and they love to release their very technical white papers. So their intentions and their plans have been publicly shared for those who are willing to read these somewhat boring documents.
Right.
Discuss them. And that's kind of been the best parts, I think, for me about being part of this XRP army is that there's a genuine desire to kind of figure out what's going on here.
Right.
From the Riddler side or these white paper sides, and to try to dissect this, knowing that there is a group of people out there who are fully aware of what the intentions are, and they won't tell us. So we've got to sit around trying to figure out the riddles and the clues in this bizarre game. And I think we're right. We're seeing just confirmation after confirmation that, gold and assets will be part of the money system moving forward. And, you need to have a company like Ripple be negotiating deals and arrangements with these various financial institutions so that it's an organized, ecosystem or economy globally.
Absolutely. And it really is. I remember when I ran across Ripple, it really is one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting story in all of crypto. Because you're thinking, why? Why did they pick on this particular company? Why did they go after this company? They could have went after Doge. They could have went after this coin or that coin. And nothing against Doge, but it's why? And so that was the thing that really got me to digging. Why? Why this particular coin? And the question I'll ask you is something that really confused me for so long, because it's kind of like when I saw Bitcoin for the first time, I was in awe. A friend of mine flew me out to Spain. When I was doing my speaking, it was a guy who was a mentor to a lot of us speakers, and his name is Carlos Ray. And he says one day he calls me, "Hey James, I got this guy I want to tell you about. I want you to meet him." And he goes, he went from driving cabs back in the day to $100 million. He's worth $100 million in this thing called Bitcoin. And I'm like, if anyone would have told me that, other than him, I would have probably hung up the phone or just said, "This is ridiculous. You're trying to pitch me something." But because of who he was, I listened. And so when I went to go meet this guy, I wound up going to, at the time they were doing these trading bots, which is what his program was. So obviously he wanted me to see that. But I was just in awe because I didn't understand what Bitcoin was. And so that's how I initially was introduced. But once I got to XRP and I understood what it was, I'm sitting there going, and so as you're looking at social media, you're looking at, let's say, Instagram and all the all these influencers. The thing that was confusing to me, Linda, I'm sorry, Molly, you said Linda P. Jones. I love Linda as well. But the thing that really confused me was, how is all these other guys who are maxis got these huge channels and huge followers? How come they're not only embracing XRP, but they're talking down on it? And I didn't understand it. And so the thing that I finally came up with, like many years later, is I just think it comes down to not understanding business, not understanding opportunity. They're looking for that 100-yard dash. They're looking for that quick hit. They're looking for that microwavable result. They're looking for that scratcher or that lottery ticket or whatever you want to call it. And they don't understand business, because what I started realizing is, before I even got my own channel, and I was looking at these guys, young guys, and again, this is not saying anything negative against anyone, but I started trying to figure, okay, let me look at this guy's name. His name is, let's say, Brian. Let me go in and, okay, so Brian, 3 or 4 years ago was, skateboarding on the beach. I mean, so then I start realizing these guys who are acting like professionals in crypto really aren't professionals. They're just guys that are shilling these coins and all these type of things. So I say all that to lead into this next question, which is your thoughts on Ripple, as far as, do you feel they're a solid company? And if so, why?
I absolutely do. One thing that I've been paying attention to for the last couple of years is how some of these crypto projects represent themselves publicly. That includes on things like social media. Right. Now, I spent like a very big chunk of time in my career in the corporate world where like, if you were ever insulting to a client or rude to someone publicly, like, you got fired. Like, right. Not negotiable. Yeah. And so I'm not even capable of like insulting people on Twitter, because like there's a thing built into me that would be like, don't do this, because some bad thing will probably happen to you. Right. And I'm kind of amazed when I see people who are leaders in companies like do really stupid things on social media, because it just tells me like, have you not had a job before? Like, is this the first time? And I've seen this with CMOs and CEOs of like companies that employ people, kind of acting like a child who doesn't really understand appropriate professionalism. Right. And Ripple is like the quintessential, incredibly polished, professional, appropriate company. And this is why they have been able to form relationships with central banks and banking institutions, globally. They don't show up as like a crypto bro in a hoodie talking down to people with a bunch of jargon. Like, they understand that the business world has a certain level of professionalism that is expected. And Brad Garlinghouse is a very polished CEO, and you could put him in front of anyone. That's right. And he would represent Ripple to the best of his ability. And you don't see like the talent with that level. No. Or, there was like a gambling thing on the XRP ledger, and the two of the leaders of that company would often be very rude on social media. And I'm like, there's no way this company can make it if this is how the leadership of this business acts publicly. Exactly. And now Ripple is more, I think, than simply their professionalism. They've been spent the last, decade or so, building relationships, knowing that a network has value because of the users. Like lots of blockchains have good tech. Right. Great tech. And you could go out tomorrow and build, knowing what we know now, a really solid smart contract enabled, fast, low cost blockchain. But if nobody's using it, then no one cares. And so when people make these sort of comments about, why don't they just fork the XRP ledger and like create a copy of it? Well, if no one uses it, then what's the point of that? And Ripple has spent a lot of time building relationships, building a very strong, trusted brand, so that the institutions that move a lot of money don't feel like they're putting it into some like disorganized, chaotic startup with a bunch of kids who have no understanding of what's really going on. Exactly. And it's funny, Molly, because when I know you've been around for a while, as I have, with this space, and when we had that downfall from 68,000 towards that $15,000-$16,000 price, you saw companies laying off, you saw companies going bankrupt, you saw companies running for the hills, getting out of, if they were in the United States, sometimes they were leaving. And I'm talking about companies that were maybe not here licensed. It really shook up the industry. And with all the layoffs and even bank runs were crazy, it seemed like Ripple continuously expanded. They grew. They were acquiring companies. They were bringing on people like, I can't think of her name right now, the 43rd Secretary of the United of Rosie Rios? Treasury. Yeah, Rosie Rios. And they were bringing on these major people. And I'm going, wow, everyone else is running, and yet they're expanding, they're building, and you hear about countries, and they're doing all these different things.
my question to you is, why do you feel more people don't understand or don't get it? Is it just business intellect? Is it not understanding what the the purpose of XRP truly is? Why do you feel people right now aren't getting the value of what Ripple's doing or XRP, and why do so many people seem to be against it, in your opinion?
Well, we live in a world that is very influenced by media. I mean, that's where we get our news. We watch movies, watch TV shows. So if you think about how many of our beliefs are formed by the information that we kind of consume from all these sources. If you had an entity or group of entities that wanted you to believe a certain thing, it's not really that hard. They just have to be consistent about that marketing message.
Right.
And what is fascinating to look kind of back at the last couple of years is like the journalism world, even some of those, like, the Fox, this sort of drama with Fox News constantly, is they don't act like they're really interested in uncovering the truth. Like, they have their talking points and they are repeating those talking points. And if you kind of put together so I'm an analyst, right? So I put together the ETHGate pieces, what we see in the media, kind of what we've seen in terms of like data from the performance of these blockchains, Ripple's relationships. It really looks like there was a concerted effort to slow Ripple down.
Absolutely.
And that effort was managed by entities that had influence over the media. They had influence over the banking system, over the payment system. And so it was very much looked like a look over here and not over there.
Right.
Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, that's sort of the Dogecoin thing, I think, is even humorous, right? Because nobody's ever pretended that Dogecoin has any kind of utility value, or why is it able to do something that any other currency can't do?
Right.
But people will be like, I'm bullish on Doge because Elon Musk likes it. I'm like, that's a very risky reason to want to invest in.
Is that the problem, Linda? I'm sorry, I keep doing it. Molly, is that the problem where people keep, they're shilling Doge, you're shilling, and the fact that there's actual results, like people see Pepe went up, 2,000%, or is that the problem where people, they Google crypto, they get on, they see these influencers, and they're young, they're handsome, men and women, they're talking about all these coins, and so that's believable, I guess, and the fact that that's producing results. Is that why people are getting frustrated because XRP is not moving? Matter of fact, I'm a huge I'm very well diversified, but I got a huge position with XRP. But I was talking to my friend Mike O, who's a big business guy here, and we were just having a heart to heart, and he's like, man, James, since being in this, and I don't tell too much of his business, but in like a handful of months, maybe 4 or 5 months, he's made almost 7 figures in profit. But he's very heavily invested in XRP, but it's not really moving. So he's like, man, this is probably one of the poorest moving assets in the space. I said, but once you understand what it was created for, the utility, I said, then you get it. It's a long-term thing. Do you think that's the problem, is that people they're looking for something quick and they're not in for the long haul?
Oh, our society loves get rich quick. I mean, we're kind of taught that is the American dream, right? In some cases, like, you just get lucky, you stumble on the right thing.
Right.
And for those of us who kind of were around for the .com boom about 25 years ago, there was some of that. Some people did very well if you were kind of in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a desire for that.
Yeah.
But one thing that I learned at a very deep level in the last year from the valuation stuff is there's a difference between market value, which is what people are willing to pay for something, and then fair market value, which is what is something really worth if we look at this from an analysis perspective.
Right.
And what we see with things like Dogecoin and Pepe Coin is they really don't have a fair market value that's high at all. But when you use the resources that a lot of these VC firms in Silicon Valley have had at their disposal, you can create market perceptions that are used for what we call a transfer of wealth. So the uneducated people who don't have access to the insider information become the exit liquidity for those who are told in advance, hey, we're going to pump this coin. And what it has done, I think, is made a lot of people kind of outside the crypto world very scared of this, because they know there's a lot of these pump and dumps and get rich quick and the FTX drama and fears around money laundering. And you're like, if I don't really want to take the time to do all this research, like, that whole world seems like a scam. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I actually don't really use the word crypto anymore. And we certainly don't use Val Hill when we talk about things with potential clients. It's all digital assets,
Yeah.
DLT,
Yeah.
blockchain technology,
Yeah.
because crypto has gotten kind of like a bad taste in its mouth, like in the
Right.
public world, for people who aren't kind of a part of this.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Well, Molly, here's my next question, and I know it's something that you guys have done a lot of research on. XRP in the short and long term, because I know right now a lot of people are frustrated. In the short term, I think what people are not realizing that, and we were having this conversation it was called Hanging with the Fellows last night, where we were talking about, I said, look, XRP is going to go up, because it's still following Bitcoin. It's still following suit. So if Bitcoin reaches 100,000, we'll probably break through $1, maybe even before that. If we go up to 250,000, obviously we'll probably see a few dollars in XRP, maybe 3, 4, 5, but whatever it is. I said, so we're going to get that type of movement. It's like when Bitcoin dips, we dip. When it goes up, we go, just with the rest of the market. So it's nothing really special. The only thing that's hurting us right now is obviously that ongoing lawsuit. And we'll get into the $2 billion deal. I don't want to talk about that. And I definitely want to talk about it, but I got some thoughts on that. But do you feel that in the people aren't realizing that because XRP is moving with the rest of the space, we're not going to see a whole lot of, because it's still dependent on retail, it's still dependent on, the markets and so forth. Do you agree that our moment will come when it's embraced by financial institutions, when it's actually utilized for what it was created for? That in your opinion, maybe that flip of the light switch moment when that happens? So in the short and long and short term, where do you see potential for XRP, and do you feel that's why people are getting frustrated, because they don't understand what it's really created, what it was really created for?
I think the frustration is legitimate, and that there's been people who have been holding this asset for a long time in some cases, and they had this hope that it would have become a lucrative investment in dollars by this point.
Yeah.
That's a couple things to remember. So let's say XRP went up really high today, right?
Right.
And what are you going to do? Sell it for fiat dollars? Right. What? And we know the fiat dollar is becoming very inflated and worth much less over time.
Right.
Now, I have spent a lot of time, as have many people watching the show, and you, trying to map out what will XRP be used for exactly.
Yes.
It's really going to be a wholesale institutional move of value, right? Countries will store their wealth in it. Countries will, participate in global trade. They will make large movements of money. It wasn't really designed for retail to get rich on. That wasn't the intent of it.
Right.
And so if you understand how slow the global financial system moves, I mean, it's like a giant barge, right? People are acting like we're in speedboats, trying to navigate through this stuff quickly. So I'm a big believer in this idea of the virtuous cycle. And this is specifically with XRP, that there are two competing forces that have to kick in before we see massive, massive increases in price.
Okay.
One is a couple of very large institutions, like an Amazon type thing,
Right.
have to start using XRP at scale to move money.
Okay.
Once you get 2 or 3 of these, I mean, it was even Bob Way who kind of planted this idea in my head a couple of years ago. Once you get 2 or 3 of those, then this idea of game theory kicks in, and people are like, oh, wow, all right, so this is serious. And they start to see the price of XRP go up a little bit. So let's even just say it went from 60 cents to $5 or something.
Okay.
Which is a big multiplier, but in terms of the value of the asset, it's not extremely high. But you have countries around the world, maybe, who have fiat currencies that are being very hyperinflated, and they're freaking out that their treasury for their country is going to be losing its value. They see XRP going from 60 cents to $5 and hey, you know what? We've got to store our money somewhere.
Right.
Why not store it in an asset that's going up in price?
Right.
So what happens is they take $100 million, maybe $1 billion or whatever, and they now are holding that value in XRP. So that removes circulating supply available for transactions, which drives the price up more. And then we got this game theory thing with the various institutions using it. And now we go from 3 to 6 to 10.
Right.
And these two forces of utility using the asset and store a value to hold wealth, they start to compete with each other, and it creates a cyclone effect. And that's where we see very, very significant increases. None of this happens until we at least have one big kid using it.
Right.
And I think when we have 3 very important globally, institutions using XRP for moving of money will see these differences. This is why I get a little frustrated when people complain that like the reason why things aren't moving is because like Ripple isn't paying for more startups to build like gaming applications on the XRP ledger. Like, first of all, it's not Ripple's responsibility to be an incubator for the entire ecosystem. But if they do that, that's awesome. I don't see that they're obligated to do that at all. But having a couple of like gaming things or whatever on the XRP ledger is not going to materially impact this virtuous cycle, global adoption in terms of financial institutions. So we got to wait until these big companies decide that now's the time for them to switch over from a system that probably served them very well, but they know it's on its way out. And so we see there's some resistance to jumping into the new world because it's going to, I mean, think about Visa and MasterCard, right? They have had a really great thing going for a long time, like points on every single transaction. And now we live in this world where credit cards are used constantly. So, you know, they're part of this shift to this new world because it's going to affect their business models. And then if you're familiar with correspondent banks, like that's how money gets moved globally right now. You know, JP Morgan and Citibank, they're not really in a hurry to give up those profit centers as we move to these new systems. So there is resistance from these legacy financial institutions to moving to this new thing. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's more efficient. That's the direction we're going, and that's clear. But you know, they're not incentivized to do that quickly. And I think a lot of people who are invested in holding XRP, there is an impatience, and impatience is actually rooted in fear. Like, if you're fully confident that something's going to happen, like if I go to a restaurant and order a meal, like I'm not worried that it's not going to come, so I can just sit there and hang out. Impatience is a fear that like what I want to happen might not happen. So I need confirmation so that my fear can be kind of alleviated. And that's what I see a lot in the XRP world, is a group of people who are just scared that maybe it's never going to happen, and they want that action to alleviate this fear.
Yeah, and I think part of that, Molly, in my opinion, is we always talk about on my show having these 5 steps of success in crypto. And I always say number 1 is you have to have a strategic plan, not just a plan, but a strategic plan. You know, there's people who got on the Titanic and they had a plan, right? So you got to have a strategic plan. Number 2 is always do your own research. No matter what I say or anyone else says, you got to do your own research, which is something that obviously that's something you stand for, is making sure, you know, you do your own research. The third thing is controlling your emotions. I think that's one of the biggest killers in the space. And the fourth thing is obviously learning how to take profit. I have a strategy and a plan on when I'm going to at different levels. And obviously I got, parts of my portfolio, XRP included, I will never touch until a certain point. And then 5, always being focused on your why. Why are you doing this? I always tell people, if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not big enough. Like, it's kind of like New Year's resolution. I'm going to the gym, 2 months into it, I quit. So it's got to be something bigger than you. We'll quit on us, but typically we won't quit on our why. And so I say that because, in my opinion, one of the things that's really exciting for me is seeing where XRP and Ripple has how they have expanded, the things that they grow, different aspects. You got AMM, you got XRPL, and all the different things that it does. And I love that comment. I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit. When Brad Garlinghouse says, he goes, when we got into cross-border payments, it's kind of like when Amazon was just in the books. We're so much more now, and we're expanding in so many different areas. Talk about that, if you don't mind covering some of the things that are exciting you now with what the direction that Ripple's going in XRP.
Sure. So David Schwartz has been a great source of information because he speaks publicly on their plans, and he's pretty straightforward and I think very honest about kind of what's going on. He's talked about some of the challenges that they've had. Now, I worked at a startup in the .com boom era that we were very early, and I relate very well to how frustrating it is to know you've got a good product, but your market doesn't really understand it yet. He's kind of explained that like they thought that payments would be a great place to start, but now the shift is seeing that tokenization of assets. There's a lot of potential there. Larry Fink has a lot of influence, and so when he goes onto the news circuit talking about how tokenization has arrived, we've kind of seen a lot of excitement in the industry about that. And Val Hill is very much a part of this tokenization world. And we're seeing that Ripple is embracing not only kind of the movement of money via payments, but also the tokenization of assets and the consequent, exchange of those assets using the blockchain and digital assets, which is very exciting.
Yeah, big time. And, I want to kind of shift gears here because I think you might be part of one of the greatest things being developed right now with this documentary. I want to talk about Fruition Productions, and I think it's going to be huge in our history for decades to come. People look back and they'll kind of like we look back in history of certain things, like what happened during that time with EthGate and XRP Unleashed and all. I think it's going to be huge, and I just think it's phenomenal that they brought people like yourself in, and so I'm really excited. I'm very proud of them for bringing quality individuals like yourself, and I can't wait for it to be released. And now they're talking about doing it in a 6-part series because of how much information and data, and it's just amazing. I want you to talk about, first of all, how'd you get that call, and what does that mean to you? Because I love that video where you were sitting there, and you just kind of showing everybody, and it's like, this is one of the most professional things I've ever seen, and it just got me all excited. And so, yeah, talk about that whole movement what they're doing over at Fruition.
So what I think is fascinating for Chris and Maya is I think they got into this XRP documentary idea not really understanding at the time like what a Pandora's box it was going to be in terms of things like EthGate and some of the backstory on that.
Right.
So I got involved because they initially asked Jimmy to participate, and Scott works with us at Val Hill. And I was on the email threads, and they were like, "Oh, will you do it too?" And I was like, "Sure." And we had some logistical things. I was originally going to go film with them in DC, but I was coincidentally going to be in Los Angeles at the time that they were filming with Lewis Jackson. So I was out in LA. We got to film in this very cool warehouse thing that used to be it was like the Batcave in one of the Batman movies.
Wow.
I'd never been to South Central LA before, so that was an interesting trip.
Who knew that the Batcave was in South Central, where NW? It's like, really?
Now, when you're on Google Maps, it doesn't say, "Oh, by the way, this is South Central." Like, there's no sign, "Welcome to South Central."
That's funny.
I kind of had to figure out.
So Molly, you telling me Batman lived in the hood? Is that what I'm playing? I'm playing. Let's get. That's funny.
The other thing is, the Batcave isn't underground in this particular one. This is like an above ground warehouse. Okay. That was such a neat place to film something.
Right.
And then the next day was like the polar opposite in this absolutely stunningly gorgeous Los Angeles mansion. Wow. So they've invited a lot of people to be participants in this. And I think one of the odd criticisms that people had about my participation was they're like, "Who made you an expert in XRP?" And I was like, "No one. I don't know how you get to be that." But they actually interviewed me about somewhat unrelated, somewhat macro topics. So okay. I talked about things like world reserve currencies and how we're seeing that the fiat dollar system has created a lot of problems globally for other countries, and that the BRICS nations are kind of fed up and tired of being subservient to this political dollar system, right. And how there needs to be a solution. And the solution is not to give another country like China the reins and say, "All right, now you're in charge of the world and you can do whatever you want. If people don't agree with you politically, you can just kill them." We right. don't want to continue the system that the dollar people have. I don't even like to call it the American money system anymore, because right. as an American citizen, I do not in any way condone what right. the Federal Reserve has done in terms of weaponizing the money that they print out of nothing.
Right.
And so if you set the stage for what's going on globally, you can see that a solution like XRP is necessary if we want to avoid kind of a world war situation, which of course all of us do. And right. we've seen the weaponization of the dollar. Even before I kind of got woken up to the corruption in this world, if you ask people what the dollar was backed by, they're like, the full faith and credit of the United States. And you're like, right. What does that really mean?
Right.
Sounds kind of clever, good marketing people wrote that. So you realize that it's being backed by us as taxpayers and our ability to pay taxes.
Right.
And be good little employees, which I don't really agree with ethically. I never needed to be collateral for a money system.
Right.
And so you can see why having XRP that is not issued by a nation, and there's no incentive via the mining thing to, make it a profit center. It's just like a currency that exists, is nation agnostic, can be used very efficiently to move money between entities, and it can prevent people from having to hold another nation's currency if they don't really want to do that.
Absolutely.
So that was a lot of the stuff that I talked about in the documentary, was some of the more macro issues that are going on that make XRP necessary, but another solution could have been used other than XRP, which is why the lawsuit and EthGate kind of enter, is that there's been a big land grab for who gets to be in charge and control this new system. And what's amazing is the corruption is not going to win. Like
Right.
we live in this. So back in 1933, they did this buyback of gold, right? Like they were trying to change the money system.
Right.
They forced American citizens to sell their gold. If you did not sell it, you were fined or you went to jail. Like it was
it was crazy. Yep.
And back then, like they didn't have the internet. So like people couldn't get onto Twitter or YouTube and talk about how this is messed up and maybe we should ask for fair market value of our gold if they're going to force us to buy it.
Right.
So if they had tried to do the same thing again, like this time we have the ability to communicate with each other. I mean, that was the whole point of the buyback, was to help wake people up that like this has happened before, that the money system can be corrupt. Like, and what they're doing now looks a little bit shady. We at least should, if they're going to try to screw us out of this asset, we should at least ask for a very high price so that we don't get swindled and taken advantage of like people did back in 1933.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking about this last night when it comes down to, they understand exactly what XRP is. They understand exactly what it does. It's not like they haven't tested and done research or at one point wanted to control it. So I think that that's using what you're saying, because I personally feel, and I don't want to say this for sure, but I feel that there'll be a day where it might be hard to acquire XRP when it's really being utilized for what it was created for.
So let's say hypothetically that, the price, once the virtuous cycle kicks in and, there's only 100 million and there's quadrillions of value in the world. So let's say the price goes up to 10,000. You need 10 XRPs to like open up a trust line on the ledger. That's going to be a lot of money for people at some point. Or right now I can create a whole bunch of XRP wallets and the cost is fairly nominal, but there's going to be a day where even to open up a ledger account is going to price people out, let alone, you could maybe buy like if they turn it into little drops or ripples or whatever, like 1/1,000,000th of an XRP, you could have some of that, but you're still not going to have enough to open an account on the ledger, which is why like we've been given this blessing, like these years to figure this out and discuss it. And people complain that the price is suppressed, but it's letting you accumulate more and wake up your friends and neighbors and family or whatever to create some of these accounts on the ledger, because we're going to wake up one day and it's going to have changed and you will have missed the boat.
I agree with you. Let me ask you a question, and we're going to go off topic here. Why is it so hard for people to wrap their head around the fact that obviously with the suppression, with the lawsuits, with all these different things that have kept the price down, why is it so hard for people to understand that the value of where XRP can go when Bitcoin in itself was less than a penny at one point? So like, I mean, people always say, I wish I could go back in the beginning. I'm like, you would have never made it, because even if you would have got Bitcoin at, let's say 50 cents, you'd have probably sold at $10 or $5 or $2, whatever the case may be. So why do you feel people have a hard time hearing $1,000 XRP, a $10,000 XRP, a $25,000 to $35,000? Some people got bigger evaluations than that, which I have a gentleman that's going to be coming on talking about that. But why do people have a hard time with that when Bitcoin was less than that?
It's a great question. Now, when I first found Bitcoin, as a professional marketer who has worked with very large brands who have big budgets, I immediately realized like the Bitcoin marketing machine is on point. And I didn't know back then that they were going to have this message that nobody's in charge of Bitcoin. Like it has, there's some basic things. It has a logo that is used everywhere. It was really this decentralized thing where people could do whatever they want. There'd be like 100 Bitcoin logos and they would all be competing. It would be a chaotic mess. But instead, all the messaging is on point. The consistent sort of narratives that people like Michael Saylor and Safadine Ammous, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, they're all kind of saying the same things, which if you look at what the media does when they have their on message times, like it's coordinated. Now, by whom, I don't know. I can just identify as like somebody who's worked with professional marketing organizations that the Bitcoin stuff is very, very well organized. And so I think they've created this narrative that Bitcoin is now like safe and stable and kind of accepted, but there's this public fear on XRP, this lawsuit. And if you haven't done the time that we've done to understand the origins of that, you might just be scared and think, well, the government is good, right? The government loves me. They would only sue Ripple if they had done something really, really bad. They would never have done it for any other reason. I think there's this resistance to it. Now, I also, this is sort of one of my more spiritual beliefs, that like there are some of us who have been chosen to receive the blessing of XRP, knowing that we will appreciate this. And on the other side, we're going to use those resources and that value for good things.
Right.
Never really got into this because I want to buy a bunch of stuff. Like, I'm actually more fired up about the corruption and the changes to the financial system and this idea that we need to have a level playing field. That to me, I'm far more passionate about than money. I just grew up around a lot of wealthy people who are miserable. So I know that you're not going to be happy just because you have a bunch of money. Now, if you're happy and you have money too, that's awesome. But you're not excited about your life and kind of living a purpose-filled life that you're fired up about, a bunch of money is not going to.
No, not at all. Yeah. A lot of times they say money only magnifies who you are in your situation. Yeah. So let's go into, you brought up ETHGate a couple times. Stephen Naroth, and obviously you saw him on quite a few different interviews. He was actually on my show with Molly and Chris, and been on many shows speaking his truth. I mean, this is a guy, at first, when he first came out, it sounded like conspiracy theories. It sounded kind of over the top. I was thrown in the back of a van. That's just the stuff you watch on TV. This is not real. Yeah. And for him to then have John Deaton meet up, and John Deaton goes over he looks at the videos and looks at the recordings and looks at the documentation and goes on Crypto Law and says, yes, this guy's the real deal. You're like, oh my gosh. And so I always thought to myself, how can they continuously hide this? How can Gary get in front of these congressional hearings and just mute himself and not answer a question? Who is this guy? And so do you feel that this whole thing, I've got my own theory about this, but obviously let's talk about, first of all, the importance of Stephen Naroth. And then is this whole thing with Ethereum, calling Ethereum a security after they would never talk about it, acknowledge it. They pretty much try to give it a pass. Is this just timed out? It seems like it's timed out too perfect, because I was on the show that we were on last night. I said, look, for them to come out with ETH as a security now, and you saw even Brad Garlinghouse says, he goes, I don't think they're going to win that. I just don't think they have a chance. Is this like an attempt to say, okay, well, let's make people believe we're doing the right thing. Let's make people believe they're getting justice because they want to see ETH called a security. Is this just an attempt to do that so that they can hear up and say it's not, and then get ETH EFTs approved? I mean, is that could that be because I'm just thinking it's too perfect. It's too planned and I don't know. I just feel like there's more. I've never seen the SEC do something in good intentions. They're not for the people. They're not for what's the best, what's best for the United States. If that was the case, we wouldn't be the laughing joke of globally, when we were one of the best as far as an innovation. And now it's like a big joke the way they're doing things. So was this whole thing planned out? I mean, what is your take on that? Because I really feel like it's too perfectly timed. ETHGate right now, I'm sorry, Ethereum's a security. And then right after you say that, you want $2 billion for Ripple, in which we'll get into in just a second. But your thoughts on that whole thing? Is this just too perfectly timed out? And why now? I mean, why now? Why call ETH a security now? Is it past the statute of limitations? What's this whole thing about now? Because I don't believe in what I'm seeing.
I think Stephen Naroth is very brave. I think that he's been through some very traumatic experiences because of the information and the knowledge that he has. And I think many people would go and hide somewhere because they're like, is it worth it to try to stand up to these people? Yeah. I think now I've never spoken to him personally, so I'm going to make some assumptions here, but I think watching what Ripple did, where Ripple got sued by the US government, who has unlimited resources. They can literally print as much money as they want. They got sued by them and they won. So that's very inspiring. So I don't really understand why anybody gives Ripple a hard time about anything. They took on one of the most meanest, bulliest of organizations. And Naroth has also, he's an attorney, so he's smart. He knows how to play this game. Yeah. And he has fought back several times and won as well. So I think we're seeing more people kind of stand up to this entity. Now, I also grew up in a worldview where I thought that we elected our government officials and they were kind of in the public service reign and they were trying to serve the interests of constituents. Then you kind of see things like foreign aid bills, billions and billions of dollars going places, and we have no idea where the money goes really. And another great book that kind of woke me up was called Diary of an Economic Hitman. Confessions of an Economic Man by John Perkins,
Okay.
which talks about how they use foreign aid to enslave third world countries via these debts and like the IMF loans and that kind of thing. And you realize, like, if I were the mob and I wanted to have a lot of power, what I would do is I would use my money and I would install political people to ensure that all the stuff I care about like gets protected. So I think we have this system. We have a lot of organized crime like behavior in the part of government. And so I now look at them as organized crime, and I don't really have any expectations that they're going to ever do the right thing.
Yeah.
As long as we have this type of leadership in power.
Right.
And so the SEC is a tool used by organized crime to protect their interests. And if you just look at it that way, you're like,
makes sense.
Tony Soprano would have probably done something very similar. Like if he saw one of his financial concerns being threatened, he would use, in The Sopranos, he did go and pay off like local officials to make sure that what they wanted happened. Yeah. Now, why is this happening now? I think we're getting very close to this change. I also think they're going to, like, the old system has to like fully collapse. And then in this sort of mantra of problem, reaction, solution, they're going to have be like, hey, too bad that happened. But guess what? We just so happen to have this new system already. Like, what are the odds? Yeah. Let's just launch this new blockchain-based money system backed by gold. Because you know what? You're right. That fiat thing was kind of a mess. We had all this corruption. There'll be a couple of scapegoats who have to take the fall publicly. Yeah. And we'll emerge on the other side with this new system. So I think it's a narrative that's playing out.
What can we expect though, Molly? Because here's the thing. They just sentenced Sam Bankman-Fried today. And I think it was like 25 years or something like that in prison. Obviously, he did a lot of things illegal. There's a lot of felonies. The problem that I have is what can we expect with ETHGate? I mean, this is so rooted up. You got Wang Chang, China, you got China, Prometheum. You got all these different things that are that are there. And when I think of FTX, the Sam Bankman-Fried situation, they threw out the one thing that we all wanted answers to was, where did that stolen money as far as politically go? And they threw that part, they dismissed that part out of it. And I'm just like, well, if they can do that, and and hear me out on this, because I said this yesterday. I feel we're at a point right now as a country. It's not about I'm not speaking when I say slavery as a race. I'm talking about as people, all of us together, Americans. We're enslaved in this system that's not set up for us to win. And I think that's why we're having this problem right now, is because it's all about control. They want to keep people in the matrix. They don't want people. I always say crypto is a vehicle for people to dream again. And I don't think they want that. I think they want, that's not profitable for people to be able to win or succeed in life at a very high level. And so, your thoughts on that.
Control people who have money, because they'll be like, screw you, I'm not following your rules. Yeah. But I mean, this is another fascinating thing I learned not too long ago. The U.S. government is the largest employer in the world. Yeah. So if you are employed by the U.S. government and you need that job because you got bills to pay every month and you don't really have much savings, and the U.S. government does something super shady, you can't really speak out about it because you'll get fired and then you can't pay your bills. So keeping people at the poverty line or in this kind of constant rat race, first of all, is exhausting. They're not going to be able to mobilize, and it keeps sort of the vibration of people's. If you ever talk to somebody who's in a job they absolutely hate, they generally complain about it a lot, and their sort of whole demeanor is pretty negative, right? Right. And so that's a great way to keep people from rebelling against this organized crime syndicate, is to just keep them so engrossed in these lives they don't really like that they just don't care and they check out mentally.
Wow. That's an interesting perspective. So your thoughts on why now, meaning that, why call ETH a security now?
Well, I'm not too worried that that's going to play out the way we think, because it's not really up to the SEC to decide what is not security. So we need some capital markets reforms. Actually, Jimmy and I put together an infographic on his plan for how some of that should play out. There's a very clear definition of what a security is. And ETH itself isn't going to be a security either. I mean, you have to have an entity, a company, or a group of people say, if you give me money, I'll do something with it and you'll make a profit in some sort. That's what they get, the investment contract. And XRP is not a security. And while I think the Ethereum Foundation with their ICO,
yep.
That constituted a security agreement.
Correct.
They're like, hey, give us money now. We'll go build this ecosystem and then you'll make more profit on the other side.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily make the underlying asset itself. Now, I know we're going to get into the mining idea and proof of stake, like that is almost kind of like a yield-based security at times. So that means that the staking contract is potentially a security. But if I use ETH to buy, an NFT on OpenSea and pay $100 in gas fees while I'm doing that, that doesn't necessarily make the whole thing a security.
That makes sense. Yeah, big time. Let me ask you this. The SEC requesting $2 billion. I mean, that's just the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Like, you want me to consider you organized crime? Because that looks like extortion. Like, it really does. How are you entitled to like $2 billion for a fairly Jimmy has talked publicly about this, that like the issue are these institutional sales, which when you sell a private placement to, or you sell a security to an accredited investor, which of course institutions are, like you don't have to file a registration. Like if anything, there's a minor piece of paperwork that they should have filed. And you used to be able to retroactively file that. This rule was changed after the SEC Ripple lawsuit was filed. So to charge $2 billion for what's coming down to like a paperwork error is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The irony is that if you want to look at who was actually harmed by that lawsuit, like the SEC harmed a lot of retail XRP holders far more than Ripple harmed anyone. If anybody should be paying a $2 billion fine, it should be the SEC to all of us, which is kind of what the buyback was supposed to be.
Yeah. I talked about it last night and I said, for me, we're about, we saw everything that's transpired up to this point. We're 3-0. We continuously win against the SEC. And so now I think a lot of retail or a lot of the XRP community have been sitting back going, okay, well, we know they said it was about 750 million or so, whatever it was in pragmatic sales, whatever that number was. And then, so we were waiting, okay, what are they going to hit Ripple with? The whole 700 something million, 200 something million. And they come out with this 2 billion. I just think it's to me, my own opinion, is a way to try to kill hope. That they know that people are all excited. People are thinking this is coming to an end. And then you just throw that ridiculous number up. And what it did is it caused a lot of, that, and then also talking about how Ripple's spending XRP, it caused a lot of, here in the last probably few days or so, a lot of controversy in the XRP community. And what's your take on that? Just do you feel that was done to kind of kill the hope and kill the vibe of this is coming to an end? I mean, what do you feel about that?
All right, a couple of things. One, Gary Gensler has done us a service by having those MIT courses publicly available. Yeah. And in one of those courses, he said that if you want to move in to the banking world, the legacy banking system, the monopoly, you got to like pay up, like in the mob. You got to, pay the mob don of the other family if you want to enter into a new market. And so this is what the fine looks like to me, is they've conceded that XRP is going to be used, and they're like, we want our kickback, like in an organized crime. Now, this will be the interesting thing that people haven't really discussed. Like, all right, so I don't think Ripple's going to have to pay $2 billion because they have very good lawyers that will hopefully negotiate on their behalf. Let's even say they had to pay $1 billion fine.
Right.
What do you think they're going to pay that fine in?
XRP.
Right. So the cartel's like, we wanted 50% of the XRP in the beginning. If you had just given us half like we asked, then we wouldn't have given you a hard time. But you didn't really want to be controlled by the mob, so you said no. But now at the end of it, we're still going to take our cut if you would like us to get out of the way and let you do your thing. Wow.
That is very...
Now, that's just my belief or theory. I don't
no, and it's amazing. It makes more sense than you. Yeah, that's. So I didn't think of it like that. So it's got me kind of my wheels turning. So let's go into where do you see crypto right now in the next 5 years? A lot of people feel like between now you see these crazy evaluations from, and I'm not calling the company or this person, but like Kathy Woods over at ARK Investment says she looks at a $1.5 million Bitcoin by 2030. You've got a lot of people saying if that happens, Ethereum will be this price. Now, what do you see crypto in the next 5 years with all the things that are happening? Whether it's, will we have regulatory clarity by that time? All the stuff settled with XRP. Where could we be as a ecosystem in that time, about 5 years?
I would be very careful about looking at valuations of things 10 years down the road in dollars, because what we think a dollar is worth today may not be that. So if you had $1 million Bitcoin in a couple of years, but $1 million basically bought you like a Toyota Camry, it wouldn't really be the same thing, right?
Right.
Now, I understand we built these XRP valuation models for the purposes of assessing damages of the lawsuit, but that sort of didn't really take into account that they might hyperinflate the dollar to get rid of the debt. I mean, that's another thing. Like, the global debt thing is pretty serious.
Yeah.
Our money system is debt. It's become unsustainable. What is one way out of that problem? Well, is make the debt worth nothing and then build over a new system.
Wow.
So what do I think is going to happen with crypto? So I also think this narrative that crypto is like an industry is going to go away, in the same way that, like, when the internet first started, there was all these .coms. I worked in that industry, and now the internet's just part of everything. Like, we don't have an internet industry anymore.
Right.
So this idea that we have a blockchain industry is going to separate, because it's just going to be a part of everything.
Right.
Real estate will run on the blockchain. All securities and financial products will be on the blockchain. We'll get our paychecks, and we're move money via digital wallets. So I think that the idea that crypto is an industry is going to go away, because it's just going to be like the next iteration of the internet, which, the internet's been amazing, but up until recently, like, you couldn't send money through the internet.
Right.
I could send money to PayPal, and then PayPal could credit your account. But, like, that was the novel thing about Bitcoin. It's the first time you could have two people have kind of a private transaction between the two of them without this third party middleman.
That makes sense.
That's why I think it was Brian, got his last name, who said that, crypto is not a replacement for currencies. Like, crypto is a replacement for banking.
Right.
And that's why they're so threatened, because banks are middlemen, right?
Right.
And if you don't really need middlemen anymore, because you use software to do all of these decentralized exchanges, then how are the banks going to charge their points on everything? So they're having to figure out what are their new business models moving forward. So I think the word crypto will probably go away, and it will just be like how things are done. We now have apps called wallets, and that might even change as a label. But we don't really think of the internet as like some strange industry anymore. It's pervasive everywhere.
Right. That makes sense. I got another question. Before we get into the last few questions here, I want you guys to do me a huge favor. Go over, I'm going to pull it up right now, to Molly's X page. You can see right here, it's Molly Elmore, at Molly Elmore 22. Make sure you give her a follow. I'm going to ask you guys to also go over to, let me pull that up here as well. And thank you guys. Right now we have close to 900 people watching live between X and our YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for your support. Appreciate you guys in a major way. Also, I want you guys to go over to Join the Vault. And that's going to be valhiladvisors.io. And you guys can see all the incredible work that they're doing here. And we've got some other questions in regards to that here. So we're going to leave this up and go back to it in just a second. Also, I'm going to ask you guys to do me a huge personal favor and go over to our Crypto4Life YouTube channel. And guys, make sure you check out all the incredible information. Hit the join and subscribe and notification bell so you guys don't miss any of the amazing content like Molly Elmore, like Jimmy Valley, like all these other amazing. And by the way, guys, I believe it's next Wednesday. We have Shannon Thorpe on, and so I'm really excited about her being on the show. And this Friday, we have our second edition of Ladies Night, and we've got some phenomenal women that are going to be on that. I'm really, really excited about that. So yeah, definitely thank you guys for being here again. Almost 900 strong watching live, so I appreciate you guys in a major, major way. Okay, my next question is thoughts on Swift and XRP from a political standpoint. What do you think that, what's going to happen?
So Swift is a messaging system that's used to transmit information about payments. It's kind of like if we had an app where I just was like, hey, Jay, I got to send you some money, or like an invoicing system. I'm like, hey, I sent you an invoice. Do you want to pay the invoice? And you kind of communicate, but none of this sort of settlement of the money is done.
Right.
Swift has also been weaponized as a political tool. And, Russia was kind of kicked out of Swift a while ago. So I think that the idea of Swift as a separate entity that is used politically is going to go away. And we can now have probably a company like Ripple could even buy a Swift or replace it with something that serves the same function. That I don't think that the messaging service in the world of very advanced software automation, we don't really need a company to handle kind of invoicing, right? Or communication about payments that can be done automatically, can be done through software.
Okay.
Might even make sense to have more than one software so that you don't have this kind of monopoly situation where if you're kicked out of like the one thing, that's a problem. And the thing about using kind of Ripple services where they act as sort of like a hub where countries around the world can kind of come in with their sovereign currency and exchange what they want. Do you really need a SWIFT? Because we don't have correspondent banks anymore? Or can we just kind of say, hey, Jay and I are going to have a transaction. We just sort of meet and do the transaction. So I don't see SWIFT having the same role in a blockchain-based money world because software can replace that. And we've seen that it's been used as a political tool, which it shouldn't be.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Your views on BRICS, Ripple, and the Bank of International Settlements.
So BRICS, I think I see them as the former colonies of the European-centric colonizing banking cartel. Who have traditionally been producers of resources. You know, China obviously makes a lot of stuff. Russia grows things. They have a lot of oil. Even Brazil. Like you have these nations who were colonized, or in Russia's case, they attempted to colonize, who are kind of tired of being treated like the hired help, while the City of London-based banking cartel is like, we're going to give you crappy trade deals and make all the profit. So they were like, you know what? Why don't we just set up our own system and trade with each other? Why do we have to use this fiat money system created out of Western Europe and City of London that doesn't really serve our interests? So I don't think, and of course the media is not going to really tell you that this is about a level playing field and no nations being kind of taken advantage of anymore. I think eventually everyone's going to be in BRICS, and it won't be called BRICS anymore because there'll be too many layers. And it's even possible that the Republic of the United States, once the sort of corruption is gone, would be the last to join. And then we have kind of a network of all these different independent nations who are able to trade with each other globally, and you don't have anyone in charge. So the whole war machine could hopefully just go away.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the big concerns on everyone's mind globally, CBDCs. How do you think those will be implemented and backed? And is there a good version of that versus a bad? Or are there, some good positive things and also some negative things that you see with CBDCs? And is it inevitable? Meaning that a lot of people you hear, again, I don't know what talk religion or politics, but you hear Trump saying, if I'm elected, they won't happen. Your thoughts on that whole situation?
So I think several nations and things like the ECB are planning on CBDCs. Now, there's two kinds. There's a wholesale CBDC, which is how banks move money with other banks. I think we already have one of those, and no one really cares about that. The issue is with a retail CBDC, because there is potential smart contract functionality where you could program in controls. You could only buy XYZ, or you could only buy.
That's scary. Yeah.
Well, kind of. I mean, we have WIC, like we have sort of food stamps, and that's basically a CBDC with smart contract in it, right?
Okay. Didn't think about that. Wow.
The issue is if one, it's the only form of money we're allowed to use, which I don't see that happening. And two, someone who is like a bad guy is in charge of the smart contract. So that's the issue. If a very benevolent, genuinely good set of leaders are managing the smart contracts, then I'm not that concerned. The issue is that we've seen the money system being controlled by like a cabal that like doesn't have our interests at heart. And so they're using, they'd like feudalism to return. And so they are trying to create mechanisms where they get to maintain their power. So in a world where they are removed, I'm not that concerned about a CBDC.
Okay, I got you.
And I also very passionately do not want there to be an instance where that is the only form of currency that is allowed to be used. And you are like criminally in trouble if you use another currency outside of that. Because then those mechanisms become an issue. And if I'm, I don't think anyone should tell me how I can spend money that I've earned. But, if the government's going to give out like a universal basic income thing to people who are maybe have drug problems or like, kids, and, like they're like, hey, if we just give you this money and one of the parents who has a drug problem goes off and buys drugs with it, then the kids don't get to eat. So there are some reasons why those mechanisms could be necessary in certain situations where people are just not really in a place to make wise financial decisions on their own. But that's a subset of the money system.
Right.
I don't think we should have a situation where a US CBDC is the only one. Okay. Now, the other thing about a CBDC specifically is that a central bank issued money to retail or consumers or whatever. That would put the commercial banks out of business. Right now, commercial, like the Fed, it creates Federal Reserve notes or, this sort of wholesale money. It gets sent to the commercial banks. They get to print loans, which is how new money is created. They participate in the flow of money. We all deposit money in a commercial bank. If you have like a paycheck, you pay rent or mortgage or whatever. That would remove the commercial banks from the flow of money. And who do you think owns the Fed? Like JP Morgan and Citibank and some of these other retail banks, commercial banks, are believed to be shareholders of the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation. Why would they sign their own death warrant to get cut out of the flow of money?
Right.
So I don't think we're going to see a CBDC in the United States issued by the Federal Reserve that cuts out the commercial banks because there's just too many obstacles in the way. We're too awake now. I think there's too many of us who are awake who would tell everybody, listen, I was at Whole Foods a week ago and they have this facial scanning thing now. And I was asking the checkout lady, if a lot of people are using it. And she was like, no, people are freaked out about it. Wow. But a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, I think people would just assume, this must be some great, cool thing that I can, you're going to scan. Actually, I think you scan your hand on it. You scan your palm on it. But it's you're now tracking me in a different, one-to-one level that I might not be okay with. Right.
Yeah. When I first heard about it, I thought, hey, they're going to control if you've had too many donuts or you can only play bingo so many times or whatever. As far as being able to spend your money, there could be a cutoff. You've had too many calories. If you've done this too much, and they can stop those actions.
The irony is, though, I think it would go the opposite way. I mean, one of the illogical things that I saw in the 2020 COVID stuff was anything that was actually a healthy thing, they made difficult. They're you want to go grow your own garden? No, you're not allowed. They closed gardening centers and they made it difficult for farmers markets to even be open. But you want to go to McDonald's? Sure, those drive-thrus are open. Oh, the weed stores are open. Oh, every liquor store, we can't close those. So all the things that would have made you a healthier person, which potentially puts you in physical shape to rebel against the government, they don't want that. So I think, sadly, in a CBDC world, you'll be able to eat all sorts of junk food, drink as much as you want, do as many drugs as you want. As long as video games, you could probably buy video game consoles or whatever with your CBDC money so that you sit on the couch, overweight and tired and pissed off, and you're not out there mobilizing with your community to say, we expect to be treated respectfully by our government.
Right. Makes sense. Your thoughts on blockchain technology right now?
I think that it is the next iteration of the internet.
Yeah.
And the internet has changed our lives, changed the world of business, personal lives in countless ways. But there was this one issue about money being moved efficiently through the internet. And that is what blockchain technology solves. There are other applications for other industries. I think it's going to make the supply chain far more efficient. When I was doing a lot of infographics a year or so ago, I kind of had no idea that the supply chain wastes tons and tons of money with just people taking a long time to sign off on things and paying the same invoice twice. And so using the blockchain will, and we all buy stuff that comes from other places around the world. And so we're paying for those inefficiencies, unfortunately. And so I think we'll see things, it's going to change our lives in ways that, just like if you had a conversation to somebody in the late 90s about how the internet was going to change your life, and I told you you're going to order food from it, and you're going to buy shoes from it, and you're going to plan, check in on plane flights, people would have been like, what? That sounds crazy.
Right.
We've now seen that the internet has changed our life in every possible way. And I think that blockchain is going to kind of have a similar revolutionary impact once it's going to take a little while, but once it can.
Yeah. I said this before and I'm going to say it again. Huge fan of you and Jimmy's, the work that you guys done. And I really think that evaluation, people, you got people looked at it one way, people looked at it, but I think it was very needed. I think especially for the XRP community and those who are invested, it gave us some different perspectives of just hearing from Joe Katz or, hey, well, XRP needs to be at least 10,000 to do what it. You guys really expanded our minds, and I think I personally appreciate that. I think at a time where we really needed it. And so what it did is when I saw Jimmy and I saw Molly, I was like, whoa, I want more access. I want to know more about, these things. So if someone's like me and they want more access to you guys and they want to learn, how can they get more information and be a part of what you guys are doing? How would they go about doing that?
Sure. So Jimmy and I are growing Valhil, which is evolving into the leading digital asset investment bank. And we work with our clients to help either buy and sell a company or tokenize equity or assets that they have. And that ends up opening up investment opportunities for other people. And the old school kind of private equity world, you had to kind of be part of that club. You had to know people and be invited into it. And so if you weren't part of this uber wealthy world, then you just didn't even know about those things. Right. And the internet, the blockchain combined with the internet is kind of opening up. They refer to this as democratizing, the world of investing. And so what we're doing at Valhil is kind of building up our own sort of tribe of people. We call it the Vault, who want to be notified when we have these types of opportunities to get in early on a tokenization effort. And, you might not be part of the like uber wealthy, but at this point you have to be an accredited investor because you have to comply with the laws at this stage. And so if you join the Vault, it's free. You basically just are on our list, and we're going to have a Zoom call next week where we're going to talk about some of the stuff that we have going on. And we'll invite you to that, and you can ask us questions if you like.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's funny because coming up in my business life, a lot of people would always ask, like, James, how did you do this and how did you do that? I'm sure they asked my friend Michael as well. And I said, look, I didn't invent anything. I just followed successful people. If there was a industry or space that I wanted to learn more about and be in that space. And I'm going to ask everyone that's watching this today. We're now almost 1,000 people live. To make sure you guys go and follow Molly Elmore, follow Jimmy Valley, just definitely immerse yourself in what they're doing, because if you're passionate about XRP, if you're passionate about your knowledge, and I always say, in anything that you do, knowledge is power. And it definitely, I think the more you know, the better you're able to control those emotions, because, for me personally, I'm not, whether XRP is 50 cents or $5, it doesn't emotionally do anything for me because I have a plan. And until my numbers are hit within that plan for my family, my children's children, I'm really sound in what I'm doing. And it's because I have people out there that I can follow, like Molly and Jimmy. So I definitely appreciate you in a major way. We're just past the hour now. Your final thoughts and anything that you want to talk about from what you guys are doing over at Valhil, anything that you're doing personally, any projects maybe you're working on, anything that you're particularly excited about. What's your final thoughts to those who are watching? Again, we're almost at 1,000 live right now.
Sure. So we've got a couple of really exciting things going on. One, we are working with clients who want to tokenize either their assets or their equity and don't really know how to do that. I mean, we're very early in this world, and there's not a lot of clarity on like, how does that actually work? And there's some instances where we have clients who are used to getting money from like the traditional banking world. And we're seeing with these high interest rates and implementation of Basel III requirements that's not really working anymore. And so the ways that those types of businesses raised money in the past are no longer available. So we're looking to tokenization to be able to tap into liquidity, basically money from people who are not usually being asked to invest in those types of things. And that's kind of what the Vault is about. And, we started doing this like last year, and it almost felt like we were yelling kind of into the wind, and that people weren't really understanding like, what is tokenization? You're bringing up these words. I don't know what they mean. You're making me feel stupid. And so we're having to do a lot of education. And that's kind of one of the things that Jimmy and I do very well together, is he's like this incredible wealth of knowledge with very complicated topics, legal topics, economics, legal structures, and how financial products are put together. And for people who are not sort of used to working in that world, it almost sounds like a different language. So he's able to kind of teach me all these things, and then I can turn around and simplify them kind of in infographics and little short white papers, so that those are easier to understand for people who are not traditionally part of that world. And we found that kind of those in our tribe are very receptive and excited about those opportunities, because one of the things about technology is that if you don't understand, it can make people scared. And they're like, I don't want to get into this thing and I don't know what the words mean. And like, there's all these people using this jargon that's making me feel like I'm not smart or I'm not educated on this. That's actually what I think the issue was a lot of people had with the terms, the buyback terms that Jimmy wrote a couple of years ago.
Right.
Was you have these sort of crypto bro types who are used to being very smart and they understand technology and they even understand technical jargon. And then they read this legal document and they don't really understand it and it makes them scared. And so they assume like worst case scenario and that there's some sort of nefarious intention, which was never the case at all. And that I think created a lot of heat. So one thing that we try to do at Valhil is to make a concerted effort to explain a lot of these more complicated, whether they're financially complicated or technically complicated products in a way that anyone can understand. I've always believed as an analyst who used to train other analysts that like, if you can't explain this thing to like a child, then you don't really understand. Like if you're having to memorize a bunch of talking points and regurgitate them, then you don't really understand. So this has been a great test to make sure that we even understand these concepts and that we're able to explain them to people very straightforward way.
Well, I appreciate you in a major way. You guys, again, go over to X, follow Molly, Elmore. Also, you can see right next to us, I got it pulled up on the screen, Val Hill Advisors. Make sure you connect. You guys said you got a call coming up this week or next week?
Yeah, so next Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern. And if you join the vault, I'll be sending out some emails with the Zoom link and whatnot. You can join it. We'll tell you about the projects that we're working on. We also have a media venture that we're working on because, you know, a lot of the sort of influencers in our space have been frustrated that YouTube censors and can put restrictions in place about how you can kind of reach people. So we've long believed that a decentralized media world would be a great one. But actually, you know, that's kind of one of the freaky things about the library lawsuit with Odyssey is they were kind of a tiny little company. Why were they targeted? That's a whole nother rabbit.
That's,
you know, if you threaten the ability to control information by having a decentralized option that is taking off, that's a big threat to narrative control. And Library was doing a great job kind of building this decentralized platform, and they were literally taken out. And it was horrific to watch that. I don't know if we will build something exactly like that, but I do see there being a world where information is not controlled by any small group of people and that we're able to speak freely. And if you don't like my content or you think it's wrong or whatever, then just don't watch it. But the idea that I should be told I'm not allowed to speak about specific topics.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
And even like I have a YouTube channel as well. And I remember when the like Russia-Ukraine thing first started, like YouTube sent like rules, like you're not allowed to have this point of view on this topic. And I was like, how does YouTube know who's right on this? I'm like, oh, we're in narrative control already. It's just starting.
What is the name of your YouTube channel?
Now it's just under Molly Elmore, but we have Escape Velocity is a Valhil one as well.
Okay. Which one would they be more connected to you? Would it be the Molly?
Yeah, if you just look for Molly Elmore on YouTube, it will show up. I used to do it under a brand I had before called Clever Hummingbird, but I've kind of sunsetted that for now.
Okay, guys, we just pulled it up right here. So you guys do me a favor and go over to Molly's YouTube page and give her a follow, subscribe. I just did it right here. And then also hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the amazing content. So I see some really good, you were on with Rob Cunningham. Yeah, you got some really great content there. My buddy Jimmy there. So yeah, appreciate you in a major way, Molly. Thank you guys for all that you guys are doing. And by the way, I believe I got a pre-commitment to a future ladies' night with you.
I'd love to. I can't this Friday, tomorrow.
No, it's fine.
Next Friday, and I'd be happy to join.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be amazing. We've got some incredible ladies. I'm really excited. Again, guys, if you guys get a chance, tune in tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And guess what? We got Molly Elmore that will be on the next show thereafter. So Molly, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan. Appreciate you guys for all you do. And you guys make sure you go over and follow my friend. Well, until then, we'll see you guys mañana. It's your boy James, aka 68J. You guys take care. Peace.